Hey guys, Mr. Rooney here. A while ago I asked you guys what you'd like to see on the channel, and some people suggested, how about you make some lists? And I haven't really made one since then. But I think it's time that the channel does something a little bit different, because I get this weird little spider sense, tingly feeling that some people are not really enjoying the content as much, and I think that's partly just because I go away for such long periods of time before I put out another video. So I thought maybe we could do something a little bit fun and do, this might be a vaguely long video. I've got two tiny stacks of CDs here to talk about, but these are albums that all kind of played a role in my younger life, elementary school and high school, and just kind of shaped my love of music in general, probably going all the way up into my first year of college, which was about 3 years ago. So, yeah, this might be kind of fun. Actually, it was about 5 years ago. So, I've got some nostalgic albums here that I keep pretty close to my heart, and just wanted to talk to you guys about them because I think you might enjoy this, and I think a few of these albums are probably going to show up on your list as well, because I feel like a whole lot of my viewers were probably born around the same time span as me. Some of you probably not, but I was born in the year 1990. So some of these albums have a certain impact on me just because of the time period I was born in. Some of them are older, but just thought this would be kind of a fun list for you guys to sit and listen to. So the first album I want to talk about is Linkin Park's Meteora. I listened to this album so much in my younger days, 7th and 8th grade, that it's still one of my favorite albums of all time. Really, it's just so iconic. It's really classic. I feel like this is an album that's going to live on for years and years to come. This is the album that got me into Linkin Park, Breaking the Habit. I saw the music video for that. That's what turned me on to these guys. I still love Linkin Park to this day. I love almost all of their albums, and Meteora is just a perfect album. Fun to listen to every time, just hard, fun, rock music. I love Meteora, perfect album, it's great. Next I want to talk about Park Life by Blur. I listened to Blur a shitload in my high school career, and I think I was about the only person in my entire high school who listened to Blur. I also have Modern Life is Rubbish here because Park Life and Modern Life is Rubbish are two of my favorite Blur albums, to go along with the very first Blur album that I ever got, which was Think Tank, their very last album. This is the album that I got to start listening to the band, which is probably not the best place to start because it was so much different than everything that they had done before, but Blur is a really important band to me, and they're a band that I'm going to be listening to for the longest time. Damon Albarn is my hero, probably my favorite musician. I love almost everything he puts out, his world music, the side projects he does, Gorillaz obviously, Blur, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. He's just a genius, and I love all of his music. And those albums are just really important to me, and I'll never stop listening to Blur. Next, Green Day, American Idiot. Okay, yes, this is the album that got me into Green Day. My parents didn't like me owning albums that had the parental advisory content sticker on there, and this was the very first album that I got where they actually didn't mind it, because even my parents fell in love with American Idiot. They absolutely loved everything that the album had to offer. And it's a classic album, gonna live on throughout time. I listened to it a whole lot. The album actually came out soon before I graduated from elementary school. So yeah, Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams were playing in my 8th grade graduation's DJ booth like constantly, and we were all singing along to it. Along with Dookie, just because of how classic it is. And this album will also go down in punk history as one of the greatest punk albums ever made. Green Day are just an iconic band, and I know they get a whole lot of hate now about the whole selling out thing, but I don't really give a fuck because they're a good band, they make fun music, and I love them. So, whatever. Next, I want to talk about Michael Jackson's Thriller. I listened to this one a whole lot in high school, too. Apart from the few random, theater kids, I don't think many other people listen to Michael Jackson, but this album is absolutely perfect, one of the best albums ever recorded. Just, it's fun, there's so many hits on this album, the deep cuts are just as good as the hits. It's amazing. Every song on this album, I think, was a hit. So, if you haven't heard Thriller, listen to Thriller. One of the best things ever recorded, I think. Next, I wanted to mention The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. I mentioned this one a little bit before. This was kind of like a supergroup thing that Damon put together along with Paul Simon from The Clash, Simon Tong from The Verb, and Tony Allen from Africa Express, I believe. Tony Allen also did a song for Air, which I really like. But The Good, the Bad, and the Queen is an amazing album, really dark atmosphere, really a whole lot of lyrical songs about London, old age London. Really amazing record. Really underrated, I think, myself. This one actually has a few cracks in it. I need to kind of replace this one. But I got a whole lot of airplay out of that in my high school career, and I absolutely love it. Next, I want to talk about Stop the Clocks by Oasis. This is a compilation album. Kind of contains a whole bunch of Oasis best songs along with a few B-sides. I love Oasis. I like to talk a whole lot about the whole Blur and Oasis rivalry, but I like both bands personally. This is a great compilation for somebody just getting into Oasis. This album right here is actually how I started listening to them, and ever since then, you know, I've gotten like What's the Story, Morning Glory, and their newest one, Dig Out Your Soul, was actually one of my favorite albums of that year, but that was way before I started doing YouTube. But Dig Out Your Soul is amazing. I still like to play this from time to time, not as much as I used to, but Oasis, Stop the Clocks, check it out if you're getting into Oasis. It's the perfect album for it. So many great songs. They're a great band. So, Oasis. Get it. I can't be a 90s kid without throwing Nevermind by Nirvana in there. One of the best grunge albums ever. Probably going to go down in history as well as being one of grunge's greatest accomplishments, along with like Alice in Chains and Jane's Addictions, a band like that. This is an absolutely fantastic record. A whole lot of people flag it as like their worst album, but I think that just comes because of how popular it is. Some people just hate on records for the dumbest reasons. But I can't deny it. This is an awesome record. I'm not a huge Nirvana fan, but I still play this one a shitload. Love that record. Next up we have the Beatles, Abbey Road. This was the very first Beatles album that I ever owned. And honestly, in the beginning, I didn't know every single song on this thing. I was a really big, huge noob, but I wanted to get into the Beatles so bad because I knew about how big of an appeal they had. My dad was also a big fan of them. But this was the very first Beatles album that I ever owned, and soon after that, in 2009, when they came out with the remastered albums, I collected every single one of them, and my love for the Beatles has sprouted ever since 2009, and I consider myself a collector now of their music, and I love the Beatles, absolutely love the Beatles. I think sometimes I still have Beatlemania from the 60s sometime when listening to these guys. They are just so amazing. So that's great. Next album is Led Zeppelin 1. Listen to this one a whole lot back in the day. This is a great record. 9 songs of perfection right here. If you love rock and roll, classic rock, Led Zeppelin 1 is the way to go. I have Led Zeppelin 2 in this list as well because Led Zeppelin 2 is just great. I thought Led Zeppelin were a whole lot better in their earlier days more than the later days, but that's just my personal feeling. I just like the more blues-oriented rock sound that Led Zeppelin had going on back when they first started. So Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2 mean a whole lot to me, and they're just my favorite releases from Led Zeppelin, as a matter of fact. An artist that I probably should have mentioned first in this list was Weird Al Yankovic, because before I even really got into music, Weird Al Yankovic was the only artist that I listened to. I'm serious. I actually have a shitload more of his albums. I even got his newest one, Apocalypse, that I never really listened to. I didn't even really like that album that much. But Running with Scissors here is really special to me because it was the very first Weird Al Yankovic album that I ever owned. And it contained the song The Saga Begins, which was a parody song from Don McLean's American Pie, where he just took the script to Star Wars Episode 1, made an entire song out of it. He put the entire movie into lyrics into this parody. And that's what really got me into Weird Al Yankovic, is after I saw the music video for that, my parents got this album for me. And this album means so much to me. I remember driving around with my dad listening to this album when I was a little kid. We would both laugh and just sing along. The song Albuquerque and Jerry Springer and Pretty Fly for a Rabbi, Your Horoscope for Today, All About the Pentiums. There's amazing songs. Some of Weird Al's best songs are on this album, in my opinion. And it's probably always going to be my favorite Al Yankovic album. I don't listen to him as much as I used to, but this really means a whole lot to me. There's a whole lot of past memories I have associated with this thing. even in my elementary school years, so that's a huge one. Here's Led Zeppelin 2. I mentioned this one a little bit before. This is their second album. Once again, another perfect album. The Lemon Song, one of the best bass lines ever. I love Led Zeppelin. They're so cool. Just some great rock music in there. To go along with the classic rock, I have to put in Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd in this thing. I don't consider myself to be a huge Pink Floyd fan, but this album right here, I'll admit, people are right when they say this. This album was ahead of its time. When it was made in the 70s, this sounds current, almost. I mean, it's just crazy how good this record is. I listened to this shit a whole lot in high school. And once again, I feel like I was like the only one that had heard this album back in the day. But really good. Love this album. Still play it from time to time. Great record. Next up, we have Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age. I think Lullabies to Paralyze is in here too. These two records are the most important to me out of Queens of the Stone Age discography because these were the two albums that I started listening to the band. Lullabies to Paralyze was my very first album that I had received from Queens of the Stone Age because of the song Little Sister. And I listened to this so much back in the day. Just an amazing record. I got Songs for the Deaf soon after that because of the song No One Knows. And these were just two of my highest played records in Queens of the Stone Age discography. Soon after that, I got into Rated R and their self-titled and Era Vulgaris, and then, you know, eventually like clockwork this year. So Queens of the Stone Age are a band that I hold really close to my heart. I see that they're going to be in my state again in January playing live, so I'm thinking about going to go see them again because that was just an amazing show that I went and saw a few months ago, and they mean a whole lot to me. I absolutely love Queens of the Stone Age. Next up we have A Change of Pace, Prepare the Masses. Once again, I'm not a Change of Pace fan. I only have this one album, but this album means a whole lot to me. I actually had this huge crush on a girl in high school, and this was one of her favorite bands. And I think I only bought this album because of her. Not because I had a personal preference, but after like listening to it myself, I myself really enjoyed this album. I don't listen to it that much anymore, but it's just a good alternative rock band, kind of in the same vein as like All Time Low or Mayday Parade. If you enjoy shit like that, then you'll probably like this. That's personally not one of my favorite genres of music, but I really like this because it has a tiny bit of a harder edge than those bands do. So check this out. It's pretty good, actually. It's a treasure. It's a underrated treasure, really. It's good. The next album I don't have the album cover for, but Switchfoot, The Beautiful Letdown. I don't think I've ever talked about Switchfoot on this channel, but this album means a shitload to me. Meant to Live, This Is Your Life, More Than Fine, Ammunition, Dare You Move, Redemption, The Beautiful Letdown, Gone, On Fire, Adding to the Noise, 24. Perfect album. I really could not get into anything else that Switchfoot put out after this album. But it's absolutely perfect. I listened to this so much when I was a kid. I got my best friend in this band because of this album, and I think this is the only album that he owns too. But I don't think they're ever going to be as good as this. This is an amazing record. God, I just cannot get over how good this record is. Really underrated, in my opinion. Well, it's not really underrated. It's just been kind of forgotten about, honestly. But I think that's a shame, because this is really special. The Beautiful Letdown, Switchfoot. Look that shit up. It's great. Next up, we have Air, Moon Safari. These guys are kind of like a French duo. Really down-tuned, really cool, quiet music. But I started getting into these guys soon after I got into The Good, the Bad, and the Queen because of that song that Tony Allen did with them, Once Upon a Time, from their album Pocket Symphony, which I would actually like to own one day. But absolutely love Air. They make some of the best music, and this is definitely my favorite album from them. This is their first album, and I don't think they've ever done really anything better than this, and I think a whole lot of people would agree with me on that. Air, Moon Safari. Check this out. It's amazing. It's something different. It's a great listen. Next up we have Muse, Black Holes and Revelations. I got into Muse after I went and saw My Chemical Romance Black Parade Tour and Muse opened up for them, and it was soon after this album came out. And back in the day, I didn't really know anything about Muse. I mean, like, I had heard of them, but I didn't know like any of their songs. And soon after that concert, I immediately bought this. And I've been in love with Muse ever since. I recently went and saw them a few months ago as well. Absolutely amazing show. The best live show that I have ever been to was Muse. Love these guys. Amazing record. Take a Bow, Starlight, Supermassive Black Hole, perfect record right here. The Second Law is great, The Resistance is great, I love Muse. Amazing record right here. Going back to more classic rock, we have Boston's self-titled album. I know that this one is also panned as being kind of cliche, but I cannot deny how good this record is. Just straight up rock music, classic rock, classic songs on this album. It's always fun to listen to when you're playing a poker game or something like that. It's the perfect album for that. Just kind of takes you back to those old days. Goes great with a little bit of Led Zeppelin on the side and a little bit of Leonard Skinner as well. So get this album. Amazing. You're not going to be disappointed if you haven't heard it, but I bet you probably have. Next up, we have an album called Bond, Classified. I'm a huge Lindsey Stirling fan, and I really enjoy like dance music mixed in with the violins and stuff like that. But I actually had an art class in high school, and the teacher would actually put on this album when we were drawing. And I remember listening to it when I was sitting there drawing, and thinking to myself, this shit is amazing. So I immediately went up to her and asked her, who the hell are we listening to? And this was the album right here, and I immediately bought it soon after that, and been listening to it ever since. This is just such an amazing record. These are some really talented chicks right here. Amazing songs, kind of in the same vein as Lindsey Stirling, as I said before, except these chicks are a quartet, when Lindsey Stirling is by herself, and there's not much of a dubstep influence going on in this album, which people might actually like better. As a matter of fact, the beats are a whole lot more tuned down in place for the violin music. So definitely check out Classified by Bond. It's really great. I listened to Bond's newest album, and I just don't think they have anything on Classified. This is an amazing record. Check it out. Underrated. Next up, we have Pretty Odd by Panic! At the Disco. My favorite album from Panic! At the Disco, probably always going to be, because everything else that Panic! At the Disco has done has been in that same vein as like Fall Out Boy and other emo bands like that, but Pretty Odd was something really different, along with the crazy instrumentation. I burned the shit out of this in high school in my car. Listen to it constantly. It's one of my girlfriend's favorite albums. Pretty Odd is really something special, along with the crazy instrumentation. Goes in there in something that's kind of like a crazy musical journey, which I think it's really underrated, I think. A whole lot of people like Panic! At the Disco for being bad for some reason, but Panic! At the Disco are an amazing band, and Pretty Odd is probably one of the best things that they put out, no matter how much people want to hate on it. In my opinion, Pretty Odd is something really special. Check it out. It's really good. And last, but certainly not least, which comes no surprise to anybody, it's the reason I started doing YouTube videos, Gorillaz, motherfucker. Gorillaz were the band that got me into music, period. This album, right here, Demon Days. The quintessential fucking album that made me want to write my own music, made me want to listen to more, made me want to get into more albums. If it wasn't for Good Charlotte and Gorillaz, I would still be listening to Weird Al Yankovic to this day, probably. But, this album means a ton to me. And you know what? I might have to add that to the list right now. Hang on. Scratch that. I gotta add this shit. Good Charlotte, The Young and the Hopeless. If it wasn't for these two records right here, I would still be listening to Weird Al Yankovic and not getting into anything else. My parents also got me a Best of Blink-182 album, but Blink-182 have never hit me that hard, and I've never really gotten as much into them as I did Gorillaz. Or Good Charlotte, as a matter of fact. I kind of got out of them after Cardiology came out. I didn't really care for that album, but The Young and the Hopeless is a classic, man. Love this record. Demon Days, Gorillaz, they're all amazing. All of these albums really shaped my love for music that I've just showed you, and it's the thing that kind of just propels me to want to listen to even more. And I know that all these albums seem a little bit consistent in their style and stuff like that, but it's just the style of music that I mostly love. And these are just some amazing artists that I hold them really close to my heart. And I really hope you enjoyed this video, because I needed to do something different. And give me suggestions for some more lists you guys would like to see. I'd be interested in hearing it. So yeah, thank you. Mr. Money 1 2 3 5. I'll see you guys later.